Tonight we drift back, not to a golden age or a bustling ancient city, not even to the birth of the gods. Before all that, there was nothing, just chaos. Not the screaming, hair on fire kind of chaos, more like a calm, yawning emptiness. A formless thing that didn't even know it was a thing. Chaos didn't create the universe on purpose, it simply was. And by existing, things started to happen. Little disturbances, ripples in the void, a hiccup here, a breath there, like a thought trying to form but not quite managing it. Then, one night, and yes, it was the first night ever, even though time hadn't been invented yet. She arrived. Nyx. Night. Wrapped in velvet and shaped like a queen. Not born from chaos exactly. Not crafted or summoned. She just emerged. Stepped sideways out of the emptiness like she owned the place. Nyx didn't speak. She didn't need to. She moved through the void like someone who knew what silence was for. She trailed stars behind her, unlit and folded. Ideas of stars, maybe. Blueprints waiting to be drawn. Chaos watched her. Or it would have, if it had eyes. Instead, chaos just felt her there. The same way you feel a storm coming before the clouds roll in. Before we begin, please comment where you are and what time it is, so we can see who's joining us from around the world. It's so interesting to know how wide of a reach these stories have. Now close your eyes, sink into the covers, take a deep breath and release it, relaxing your face, shoulders, and the rest of your body. Let your thoughts slow, and let this dreamy, poetic tale carry you gently into slumber. Nyx moved through chaos like ink through water, her presence leaving trails of possibility behind. Not footprints exactly, more like echoes of what footprints might become. And as she drifted, something stirred beside her, or perhaps within her. Or maybe it had always been there, waiting to be noticed. Erebus. Shadow given depth. Darkness with texture. He wasn't quite separate from Nyx, but he wasn't quite the same either, like the space between heartbeats, or the moment between thinking and dreaming. Erebus didn't move like Nyx did. Where she flowed, he lingered. Where she drifted, he settled. Cold, but not uncomfortably so. The kind of cold that makes you want to pull the blankets closer and sink deeper into sleep. Together they created the first difference, the first contrast. Nyx was the darkness that moves. Erebus was the darkness that waits. And suddenly the void had texture, depth, places where shadow pulled deeper than others. Chaos watched them both, or perhaps through them, or maybe they were watching through chaos. It's hard to tell in stories this old. When nothing had edges yet, everything was a little bit of everything else. From Nyx and Erebus's gentle dance in the void, their children began to emerge. Not with cries or sudden movements, but with soft sighs and whispered breaths, like thoughts taking shape in the moment just before sleep claims you. First came Hypnos, sleep himself, drifting out of his mother's shadow like mist rising from evening ground. He was soft-edged and heavy-lidded, trailing drowsy thoughts behind him like a cloak. Where he passed, even the emptiness grew sluggish and warm. His touch was gentle but irresistible, like the weight of your eyelids after a long day. Some say he was born already half dreaming, and that's why sleep always feels like falling into something familiar. Close behind him, silent as settling dust, came Thanatos. Death. Yes, but not the frightening kind. This was death as rest, as quietness, as the final exhalation of a very long day. He moved with the same grace as his twin brother Sleep, but where Hypnos was warm, Thanatos was cool. Where Sleep invited, death simply waited. Patient, inevitable. Like the pause between the last word of a story and the closing of the book. Then came the quieter children, the ones who moved like whispers through shadow. Momos, who was Blame, emerged with downcast eyes and trailing fingers. Where those fingers brushed against nothingness, doubt began to form. Not cruel doubt, not yet. just the soft question mark that follows every decision, the wondering that keeps you awake at night. Wheezy's misery followed, but not the sharp kind of misery that comes with tragedy. This was the heavy kind, the tired kind, the weight that makes your shoulders droop and your steps slow. She moved like autumn rain, like grey mornings, like the sigh that comes when you're too weary to even name what's wrong. Moros appeared next, doom in its most ancient form, not destruction or disaster, but inevitability. The quiet certainty that all things must end, all paths must lead somewhere, all stories must reach their last page. He didn't stride or stalk, he simply was, like the horizon that's always waiting no matter how far you walk. These first children of night moved through the void like a procession of half-formed thoughts. They weren't fully separate from their mother yet. They drifted in and out of her shadow, like dreams drift in and out of sleep. Sometimes they were distinct, sometimes they blurred together, the way worry blurs into exhaustion, the way blame melts into misery, the way sleep sometimes feels like a small death. And behind them came the softer ones, the gentler aspects of darkness. Jerus, who was age, moving slow and stiff but dignified. Apate, sweet deception, who smiled like starlight on water. Beautiful but never quite where you think it is. Philotes, tenderness, who might have been the first warm thing in all of existence, drifting through the void like a remembered embrace. They were followed by the oneiroi, the dreams, countless and ever-changing. They fluttered around their mother like unfolded origami, like scattered pages of unwritten stories. Some took the shape of hopes, others of fears, still others of memories that hadn't happened yet. They were the first artists of existence, painting pictures on the blank canvas of possibility. As these divine children drifted through the formless void, their very existence began to create patterns in the nothingness, like ripples spreading across the surface of a dark pool. Each movement, each gesture, each silent footfall left traces in the fabric of what would become reality. The dreams, ever restless, were the first to begin weaving patterns. They danced through their mother's shadow like scattered leaves in an autumn wind, each one leaving behind a gossamer thread of possibility. Where their trails crossed, the first stories began to form, not with words or images yet, but with the possibility of words, the potential for images. They were writing the language of imagination before there was anyone to imagine. Hypnos, heavy-lidded and gentle, created the first cycles. As he drifted, his presence caused the void to pulse slowly, like breathing, like heartbeats, rest and waking, though there was nothing yet to rest or wake. His movements carved out the first rhythm of existence, the eternal dance between consciousness and unconsciousness, between doing and being. Where he passed, time began to take shape, though it moved as slowly as honey dripping from a spoon. Thanatos followed these new rhythms but added his own deeper pattern. If Hypnos created the small cycles of rest, Thanatos created the great cycles of ending and beginning. His presence gave weight to existence, made it precious because it wasn't endless. He moved like the final notes of a lullaby, like the last pages of a beloved book, making everything more beautiful because it couldn't last forever. Moros, watching his siblings dance, began to weave destiny into the emerging tapestry. His touch left behind silver threads of inevitability, creating paths through the void that would become the first choices, the first journeys, the first stories. These weren't harsh or cruel destinies. They were more like the way rivers naturally find their path to the sea, the way stars wheel in their courses, the way sleep eventually finds even the most restless mind. Oasis and Momos moved together, their combined presence creating depth in the formerly flat void. Where Oasis's heavy sadness pressed down, valleys formed in the nothingness. Where Momos's questioning fingers traced patterns, ridges and peaks rose up. Together they created the first landscapes of existence. Not physical yet, but emotional. the peaks and valleys of feeling that would eventually shape all hearts. Philotes, tender and warm, began to create connections. Where she passed between her siblings, invisible bonds formed, like silk threads connecting stars. These were the first relationships, the first bonds, the first understanding that things could be separate yet connected. Her touch made the void less lonely, less empty, even though it was still vast beyond comprehension. Geras moved slowly but steadily, and in his wake things began to change. Not aging as we know it, but the possibility of transformation. His presence taught the void that things need not remain as they are, that change could be gentle and dignified rather than violent and sudden. Where he passed, the nothingness learned to yield, to adapt, to grow old gracefully. Apate, beautiful and elusive, danced through her siblings' patterns like moonlight through leaves. Her movements created the first mysteries, the first secrets, the first possibilities that things might not be exactly as they appear. She taught the void how to hide things in plain sight, how to keep secrets, how to make reality more interesting by making it less certain. And weaving through it all were the Oniroi, countless and ever-changing. They took the patterns their siblings created and began to play with them, rearranging them into new configurations. They were the first artists, the first storytellers, the first to understand that reality was not just what is, but what could be. Their dance created the first possibilities of imagination, of hope, of wonder. In those early moments of existence, the patterns left by Night's children began to gather substance, like dew collecting on a spider's web. Each intersection of their paths, each overlap of their influence, became a point where reality grew slightly more solid, slightly more defined. The dream's wandering paths began to catch starlight. Not real stars yet, but the idea of stars, the potential for light captured in their gossamer trails. These points of almost light hung suspended in the void like notes of music waiting to be played. Where multiple dreams crossed paths, the gathered light began to pulse and swirl, forming the first nebulae, cosmic clouds of possibility waiting to be born. As Hypnos continued his endless drift through the void, his rhythmic presence began to create waves in the fabric of existence. These waves, like ripples in a dark pond, started to move in patterns, expanding, contracting, gathering. Where the waves met, they created nodes of energy, spinning slowly at first, then faster. These would become the first galaxies, turning in their cosmic dance like drowsy thoughts circling just before sleep. Thanatos' touch gave these forming structures boundaries, edges, definition. His presence taught the universe about endings, which made beginnings possible. Where his influence was strongest, matter began to concentrate, drawing together under its own weight until it ignited. The first true stars burning in the darkness, each one a point of light pushing back against the endless void. The landscapes carved by Oises and Momos' passage began to take on physical form. The valleys they created became the space between stars, the dark rivers of cosmic emptiness that would later be called space itself. Their peaks became clusters of galaxies. Their depressions became the gravity wells that would eventually form black holes, places where even light learns what sadness means. Moros' silver threads of destiny became the laws that would govern this new universe. Not just physical laws like gravity and light, but deeper patterns. The way all things must change, the way everything affects everything else, the way every action creates consequences that ripple outward forever. His touch taught matter how to behave, taught energy how to flow, taught space itself how to curve and bend. Philotes' connections, those invisible bonds she wove between things, became the forces that hold the universe together. Her gentle touch became gravity, became magnetism, became the strong and weak nuclear forces, all the ways that matter learns to embrace other matter, to hold together, to build something greater than its parts. Geras' influence taught the forming universe about time, not just as a measurement, but as a force for change and transformation. Under his touch, stars learned how to age, how to transform their elements through nuclear fusion, how to create the building blocks of everything that would come later. His presence ensured that even the cosmos itself would grow and evolve. Apate's dance through it all created the mysteries that still puzzle us. Quantum uncertainty, the way light can be both wave and particle, the strange behaviours of space and time at the smallest and largest scales. Her touch made sure the universe would always have secrets to reveal, questions to answer, wonders to discover. Through it all moved the dreams, still weaving their patterns, now with actual stardust to play with. They gathered the elements created in stellar hearts and began to imagine new possibilities. Planets and moons, comets and asteroids, all the cosmic dancers that would populate the space between stars. Their movements created the first orbits, the first solar systems, the first places where more complex forms of existence might eventually arise. And watching it all was Nyx herself, moving through her children's creation like ink through water, her presence still making the darkness between stars deeper, richer, more mysterious. Where she passed, the universe held its breath, remembering that before all this complexity, before all this light and motion and matter, there was only her, moving through the void, trailing possibilities behind her like a cloak of stars. Among all the star systems being woven into existence, one particular spiral of cosmic dust caught the dream's attention. Here, in what would become our solar system, they lingered longer, weaving more intricate patterns, layering possibility upon possibility like an artist adding details to a favourite sketch. A star formed first, not too large, not too small, burning with steady, patient light. Around it, the dust and debris left from its birth began to dance in elegant circles, guided by Phillity's gravitational embrace. Each orbit was a story waiting to be told, each collision a new possibility taking shape. The dreams watched as these collisions built larger and larger bodies, each one a new experiment in cosmic architecture. In the third orbit out from this young sun, something special began to gather. A planet that seemed to capture a bit of every divine influence. Hypnos's rhythms became its day and night, its seasons, its tides. Thanatos' touch gave it boundaries, a crust to contain its molten heart, an atmosphere to shield its surface. Moros's inevitable patterns became its plate tectonics, its weather systems, its endless cycles of rock and water and air. This young Earth was restless, volatile, creative. Volcanoes pierced its surface like acupuncture needles releasing pressure from deep within. Oceans formed from the breath of cooling rocks and the gifts of ice-bearing comets, drawn in by Philotes' gentle gravitational songs. The planet's newly formed moon, born from a cosmic collision, began its ancient dance, pulling at the young world's oceans like a conductor leading a cosmic orchestra. In the warm, mineral-rich waters of the first oceans, Apate's love of possibility combined with the dream's endless creativity. Complex molecules began to form, each one more intricate than the last. They combined and recombined in endless variations, like words rearranging themselves into poems. Some of these molecular poems began to make copies of themselves, stumbling upon the first secret of life, the ability to reproduce. Oisi's and Momos's influence carved landscapes both above and below the waves. Their touch created deep ocean trenches where life could hide and evolve, mountain ranges where minerals could weather and wash into the seas, providing new building blocks for life's experiments. Valley networks carried water and nutrients, creating new environments for life to explore. Geris's presence ensured that these first living things would change over time, adapting to new conditions, learning new tricks, becoming more complex. Under his influence, single cells learned to cooperate, to specialize, to build themselves into larger and more intricate forms. Each generation was a new draft of life's ongoing story, edited and refined by time and circumstance. The Oneiroi danced through it all, sprinkling inspiration like stardust. They taught molecules how to become proteins, proteins how to fold into useful shapes, cells how to photosynthesize, how to move, how to sense their environment. Each new ability was like a dream made real, a new possibility unlocked in life's endless game of invention. Through all this transformation, Nyx herself continued her cosmic drift, her passage marking the rhythm of days and seasons. Her darkness became a time of rest and repair, of growth and renewal. In the depths of her shadow, life learned to dream, to rest, to restore itself. Her presence reminded all living things that existence is a cycle, a dance between light and shadow, between activity and rest. And beneath it all, patient as ever, chaos watched. Not gone, just transformed, now expressed in the random mutations that drove evolution, in the weather patterns that shaped landscapes, in the quantum fluctuations that added an element of uncertainty to everything. Chaos had become the engine of change, the source of novelty that kept life interesting, kept it adapting, kept it creating new forms and new possibilities. In the warm primordial seas, life began its long dance of transformation. The first simple cells, barely more than self-replicating collections of molecules, learned to harvest energy from their environment. Some caught the sun's light, turning it into sugar through the first clumsy attempts at photosynthesis. Others learned to consume their neighbours, discovering predation as a strategy for survival. Each innovation was like a new verse in life's endless poem. The dreams hovered over these ancient oceans, sprinkling inspiration like morning dew. Under their influence, some cells learned the art of cooperation. Instead of consuming each other, they began to work together, forming the first colonies. These colonies were like living experiments in social organisation, each cell taking on specialised roles for the good of the whole. Some cells became protective outer layers, others specialised in digestion, movement, or sensing the environment. Hypnosis rhythms became embedded in these early life forms. They learned to sync their activities with the day-night cycle, developing the first circadian rhythms. Some learned to hibernate when conditions were poor, to burst into activity when resources were plentiful. These patterns of rest and activity became written into their very being, passed down through countless generations. In the depths where Nyx's darkness lingered longest, strange and wonderful adaptations emerged. Creatures learned to create their own light, turning the deep ocean into a mirror of the star-filled sky above. Others developed extraordinary sensory abilities, learning to navigate through touch and vibration and electrical fields. The darkness became not an absence, but a realm of possibility. Geras' influence guided the great transformations. Under his patient touch, single cells learned to bind together permanently, creating the first multicellular organisms. These new life forms were like living cities, each cell a citizen with its own role to play. They developed specialised tissues, then organs, then complex bodies with multiple systems working in harmony. The Oneiroi's creativity sparked endless variations. In the shallow waters, some creatures developed hard shells for protection, while others became swift swimmers. Plants learned to extract minerals from rock, to reach for the sun, to create complex chemicals for defence and communication. Each innovation was like a new dream made real, a new way of solving life's endless challenges. Moros's patterns of inevitability guided the great migrations. As some plants and animals began to venture onto land, his influence helped them develop the necessary adaptations: lungs to breathe air, limbs to walk, waxy coatings to prevent drying out. Each step onto shore was both an ending and a beginning, a farewell to the sea and a hello to new possibilities. On land, Oisi's and Momos's ancient landscapes provided endless opportunities for specialisation. Mountains became challenges that sparked the development of stronger limbs and better lungs. Valleys became sheltered nurseries where new species could evolve in isolation. Deserts taught lessons in water conservation, while forests inspired countless ways of reaching for light and living in 3 dimensions. Philote's touch guided the development of complex relationships between species. Plants and insects learned to help each other, developing intricate pollination partnerships. Animals developed social behaviours, learning to live in groups, to communicate, to care for their young. Each relationship was like a new thread in life's tapestry, making the whole pattern richer and more complex. And through it all, Epate's love of mystery ensured that life would never become too predictable. Random mutations kept introducing new variations. Sudden changes in environment forced adaptations. The endless dance between predator and prey drove both to develop new strategies, new abilities, new ways of being. In the grand tapestry of evolution, consciousness emerged not like a sudden spark, but like the slow brightening of dawn. It began with simple awareness, the ability to sense and respond to the environment. Early creatures developed nervous systems that started as mere networks of sensitive cells, like living spiderwebs catching signals from the world around them. The dreams paid special attention to these developing minds, weaving extra possibilities into their patterns. Some creatures learned to remember, to store information about their experiences. Others developed the ability to learn, to change their behaviour based on past events. Each small step in neural complexity was like adding a new instrument to life's orchestra, making the symphony of consciousness ever richer. Hypnos's influence became particularly important in these developing minds. Sleep was no longer just rest. It became a time of neural maintenance, of memory consolidation, of dream processing. The rhythm of consciousness and unconsciousness created a dance between experience and integration, between gathering information and making sense of it. Even the simplest brains learned to use darkness as a time for reorganizing their neural patterns. In the ocean, dolphins and whales developed complex social awareness, their large brains processing not just physical sensations, but emotional connections, family bonds, and intricate communication patterns. Their songs carried through the deep waters like poetry, each pod developing its own dialect, its own culture. The dreams drifted through their sleep, inspiring innovations in language and social organisation. On land, different paths to consciousness emerged. Birds, descended from dinosaurs, developed remarkable awareness of space and time, their minds capable of remembering thousands of hidden food locations and navigating across continents. Their consciousness was like a living map, constantly updated with new information about their world. Primates, experimenting with life in the trees, developed deep social awareness and tool use. Their consciousness became increasingly focused on understanding others, predicting behaviour, solving problems. The dreams whispered new possibilities into their developing minds, ways of using objects as tools, ways of cooperating to achieve goals, ways of teaching their young. But consciousness wasn't limited to animals. Plants developed their own form of awareness, more alien but no less complex. They learned to sense and respond to their environment in sophisticated ways, to communicate through chemical signals to recognise and react to threats. Their consciousness was slow, patient, distributed throughout their tissues like morning dew on a spider's web. As consciousness grew more complex, it began to affect the planet itself. The first major change came from the simplest awareness, bacteria and plants sensing sunlight and converting it to energy. This process transformed Earth's atmosphere, filling it with oxygen, creating new possibilities for life, but also new challenges. The planet's chemistry changed in response to life's growing awareness and capability. Social consciousness led to even more dramatic changes. As creatures learned to live in groups, they began to modify their environment more deliberately. Beavers built dams that changed water flows and created new ecosystems. Termites built vast colonies that altered soil chemistry and water distribution. Each species' growing awareness led to new ways of reshaping their world. The most dramatic changes came with human consciousness. Here, the dream's influence reached new heights of complexity. Humans developed not just awareness, but self-awareness. Not just memory, but the ability to imagine different futures. Not just communication, but symbolic language that could transmit complex ideas across generations. This new level of consciousness began to transform the planet at an unprecedented rate. Humans learned to control fire, to cultivate plants, to domesticate animals. They built cities, invented writing, developed technologies. Each innovation was like a new dream made real, but each also created ripples of change throughout the planet's systems. Philotes' influence guided the development of human social bonds, leading to ever larger and more complex societies. These societies created new patterns on the Earth's surface, fields of cultivated crops, networks of roads, clusters of buildings that grew into cities. Human consciousness began to reshape landscapes not just physically, but conceptually, dividing the world into nations, territories and sacred spaces. Oises' and Momos' ancient influence could be seen in how human consciousness grappled with existence. Humans began to ask questions about their place in the universe, to create art and music, to ponder the meaning of their own awareness. Their emotional depth added new layers to consciousness, not just sensing and responding, but reflecting, questioning, creating. Geras' touch ensured that human consciousness, like everything else, would continue to evolve. Each generation built upon the knowledge and awareness of those who came before, creating ever more complex understanding of the world. Culture became a new form of evolution, allowing changes to accumulate and spread faster than biological adaptation alone. Through all these changes, the original divine influences remained, their ancient patterns still weaving through existence like threads in an endless tapestry. Nyx's presence was perhaps the most constant, her darkness still offering refuge and renewal to consciousness in all its forms. In human minds, night became more than just an absence of light. She became the mother of mystery, of inspiration, of dreams that spawn creativity. In the darkness she brings, artists find their visions, writers hear their characters speak, and musicians catch fragments of melodies not yet played. Her influence creates a special kind of consciousness, one that thrives in shadows and silence, that sees better with closed eyes than open ones. The dreams her children still dance through human sleep, more active than ever in these complex minds they helped shape. They weave together memories and possibilities, fears and desires, creating the surreal landscapes of dreams where problems find unexpected solutions, and artists glimpse their next creations. Each night, they transform human consciousness into a theatre where past and future, reality and imagination perform an endless improvised dance. Hypnos' influence evolved beyond simple sleep. In human consciousness, he became the master of altered states, meditation, daydreaming, the peaceful drift between waking and sleeping, where some say creativity lives. His touch taught humans that consciousness isn't a simple on-off switch, but a spectrum of awareness, each state offering its own gifts and insights. Thanatos' presence became more complex in conscious minds. Beyond physical death, he came to represent transformation, the ending of old ways of thinking, the death of outdated beliefs that makes room for new understanding. His influence helps consciousness release what no longer serves, making space for growth and renewal. Moros' patterns of inevitability became evident in how human consciousness develops. From infant to child to adult, each stage following necessary steps, each mind learning to walk similar paths toward understanding. His touch ensures that certain realizations come to all who think deeply enough. Questions about existence, purpose, mortality, and meaning. Philotes' influence shaped how consciousness connects, not just between humans, but between all living things. Her touch can be seen in empathy, in the ability to understand others' perspectives, in the deep bonds that form between different species. She guides the development of ecological awareness, the growing understanding that all consciousness exists within a web of relationships. Oiz's and Momos's ancient influence evolved into the capacity for deep reflection and self-questioning. They taught consciousness to look inward, to recognize its own patterns and limitations. In human minds, they became the source of philosophical questioning, of spiritual seeking, of the bittersweet awareness that makes us search for meaning in an uncertain universe. Apate's love of mystery and illusion became essential to how consciousness understands itself. Her influence reveals itself in the puzzles of perception, in the way consciousness constructs its own reality, in the growing realization that our awareness is both creator and creation of our experienced world. She teaches that truth is often hidden behind layers of assumption and interpretation. Gera's patient touch guides how consciousness ages and transforms. In human minds, his influence leads to wisdom, the deep understanding that comes only with time and experience. He teaches that consciousness, like everything else, must change and adapt, must learn to meet each stage of existence with grace. And through it all, chaos remains, not as an opponent of consciousness, but as its hidden partner. In human minds, chaos manifests as creativity, as the ability to break free from old patterns and forge new ones. It appears in the random connections that lead to insight, in the disruptions that force new ways of thinking, in the beautiful unpredictability that keeps consciousness dynamic and alive. These divine influences don't just shape individual minds, they guide how collective consciousness develops. They can be seen in how societies evolve, in how cultures transform, in how human understanding of the universe continues to expand. Each scientific discovery, each artistic movement, each spiritual awakening carries echoes of these ancient patterns. In every art gallery, concert hall and library, Nyx's influence still whispers. When a painter stands before a blank canvas at midnight, she is there. When a composer hears phantom melodies in the pre-dawn quiet, those are her gifts. Her darkness has become more than absence. It has become possibility itself, the void from which all creation springs. Consider how many great works were born in night's embrace. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein emerged from a dream on a dark and stormy night. Van Gogh painted his most famous work under a star-filled sky that seemed to ripple with divine energy. Jazz musicians speak of the midnight hours when music flows most freely. Night has become humanity's creative sanctuary, a time when the conscious mind loosens its grip and deeper inspirations can surface. The dreams, ever playful, have found new domains to explore in human technology. They dance through digital spaces now, inspiring virtual worlds and artificial realities. When programmers enter flow state, losing themselves in lines of code, the dreams are there, suggesting new possibilities. They whisper in the ears of scientists and inventors, showing them solutions in their sleep that eluded them while awake. Hypnos has adapted his influence for modern minds. His realm now includes not just sleep, but all the ways humans learn to alter their consciousness constructively. In meditation apps and mindfulness practices, in sensory deprivation tanks and lucid dreaming techniques, his ancient power helps overwhelmed modern minds find rest and renewal. Even the popular concept of sleeping on a problem acknowledges his quiet wisdom. Thanatos' influence appears in how cultures process change and transformation. Every ending of an era, every paradigm shift, every technological revolution carries his signature. When old industries fade and new ones emerge, when ancient traditions transform into modern practices, his presence ensures that death of the old makes space for birth of the new. He teaches that obsolescence is not failure, but necessary transformation. In research laboratories and universities, Moros's patterns of inevitability guide scientific discovery. The laws of physics, the principles of mathematics, the patterns of nature, all reflect his ancient influence. but he works through human curiosity now, revealing his truths gradually through experiment and observation, through hypothesis and proof, through the scientific method's careful dance of question and answer. Philote's connective influence grows stronger as humanity becomes more interconnected. She works through social networks now, through global communications, through the growing recognition of our planetary interdependence. Her touch can be seen in environmental movements, in international cooperation, in the emerging awareness that Earth's biosphere functions as a single, intricate system. Oases and momos have found rich territory in human philosophical and psychological exploration. Their influence drives the questioning that leads to deeper understanding. In therapy sessions and self-help books, in philosophical debates and spiritual seeking, they push consciousness to examine itself, to acknowledge its shadows, to integrate its hidden aspects. Apate's love of mystery and illusion thrives in an age of virtual realities and quantum mechanics. She reminds us that even our most sophisticated scientific instruments show us models of reality, not reality itself. Her influence appears in the growing recognition that consciousness itself plays a role in shaping what we perceive, that objective and subjective reality are more intertwined than we once believed. But beneath all these patterns, these changes, these evolving forms of consciousness, there beats the heart of a much older story. For while we speak of divine influences as separate threads, they all began with a single relationship, a love story written in void and shadow, in emptiness and potential. To understand how Night and her children came to shape all that exists, we must drift back once more. Back before the first human thought, before the first dream, before the first star sparked in the darkness. Back to when Nyx and Chaos first discovered each other. Chaos wasn't exactly lonely before Nyx emerged. Loneliness hadn't been invented yet either. But when she stepped into existence, trailing stars and shadow behind her like a wedding veil, something changed in the formless void. Chaos, which had never known the difference between here and there, suddenly understood distance. Because for the first time, there was somewhere else to be, somewhere near her. Their courtship wasn't like the passionate affairs that later gods would have. There were no thunderbolts or golden showers, no dramatic chases or transformations. Instead, imagine a dance where the dancers haven't been invented yet. Chaos would thin itself in places just to feel her pass through. Nyx would deepen her darkness until even Chaos felt a little more organised in comparison. When their children began to emerge, it wasn't clear at first whether they were Chaoses or simply emerged from it. Erebus, some say, was born from their first real interaction, the moment when Chaos's formlessness met Nyx's structured darkness and created something in between. He was shadow given depth, darkness with texture, and he understood both his parents in ways no one else could. Nyx moved through chaos like ink through water, never quite mixing, never quite separate. They created boundaries between them just to have the pleasure of crossing them. Where they met, possibilities bloomed like night flowers opening to the stars. Their love wasn't hot or cold, wasn't give or take. It was the space where opposites learned they might not be opposite after all. Some say you can still see their ancient courtship playing out in the dark spaces between galaxies, where order and disorder dance their eternal dance, in black holes, where physics breaks down and chaos peeks through, in the way darkness seems thicker just before dawn, as if Nyx is lingering a moment longer in chaos's embrace. And on quiet nights, when the darkness feels alive and the void between stars seems to pulse with possibility, that's when their love story is easiest to feel. That's when you might understand how emptiness and form, chaos and night found a way to create everything that would follow.